Funding for Schaefer-Ellis is provided by
Surfshark VPN. Tune in till the end to find out about their amazing service. Recently, I watched Breaking Bad for the first time, and what do you know? It's just as amazing as everyone says it is. Easily one of the best TV shows I've ever seen in my life. And after watching both the entire series and El Camino, a lot of people were telling me to check out Better Call Saul, the spin-off prequel series that a lot of people seem to claim is even better than Breaking Bad. This isn't just a sentiment expressed by my Twitter followers. Tons of professional critics have lauded the series as one of the best spin-offs ever, one of the best prequels ever, and yes, a better show than Breaking Bad. I was really excited to watch it and see what all the hype was about. And now that I've seen the 5 currently available seasons, I mean, it's good. I thought it was definitely worth watching, but one of the best shows on television? Better than Breaking Bad? Really? I'm genuinely kind of confused by this show's reception, and I figured I'd make a little video to express my problems with it. This isn't really a comprehensive review, just kind of my way to vent about what I consider to be the most overrated part of the Breaking Bad universe. If you disagree because you love this show, I'm very happy you love it. I just don't, however, and I'd like to get into why that is. So, just a refresher on both shows real quick. Breaking Bad follows Walter White, a high school chemistry teacher who gets cancer and turns to making meth in order to get the money for his treatment and leave money behind for his family. He teams up with his bumbling former student, Jesse Pinkman, to make it, and together they turn the New Mexico meth business on its head. They meet tons of wacky characters like Gus Fring, the ruthless two-faced meth distributor slash chicken seller they end up working for, Mike Ehrmantraut, Gus's incredibly capable and badass henchman, and of course, Saul Goodman, a sleazy criminal lawyer who frequently gives them advice on how to get out of their current predicaments. All these characters are introduced in Season 2, with Saul generally serving as the comic relief after previous comic relief characters like Jesse or Hank get really depressed. I enjoyed Saul, but my favorite characters on the show were always Mike and Gus. I just thought they were the most interesting, mysterious, and badass characters the show had, aside from Walter himself, who had to grow into that role. So shortly after finishing Breaking Bad and learning that Mike and Gus were main characters in Saul's spin-off prequel show, I was pretty excited. I was much more interested in seeing more aspects of their past compared to Saul, who I'm sure had an interesting rise to power, but I still mostly just saw as the comic relief. So anyway, Better Call Saul focuses on Jimmy McGill, the man who would become Saul Goodman. He's a public defender who really isn't doing too well in his job. He also has to take care of his brother Chuck, who has some sort of weird, rare condition where he can't go near electricity, and thus has to hide in his house inside of a tinfoil space blanket. So that's a thing. Jimmy also has an on-again, off-again love interest named Kim, who initially works at the law firm Hamlin McGill, which was co-founded by Chuck back when he was a prestigious lawyer before he got this weird electric condition, and Howard, who always talks in this super fast and very funny voice. I really enjoy hearing him speak. This side of the show basically follows Jimmy as he tries to be an honest lawyer, but continues to get rejected by people who don't see him as honest and refuse to give him a chance, causing him to slip into more dishonest practices in order to get the legal results he wants. While there are some flaws with Jimmy's journey, it's overall really compelling and pretty emotionally investing. I didn't expect to find myself emotionally invested in the backstory of a wisecracking ass like Saul Goodman, but this show did a great job of making me care about him. Wow, this show sounds pretty neat, so what's my problem with it? Well, here's the thing. Remember how I said this side of the show? Yeah, there are two sides to Better Call Saul as a series, and the other side isn't nearly as compelling. Because right from the first episode, we also follow Mike, and we get to see his moral degradation as well over the course of the series. How he goes from not wanting to kill anyone to being the murder machine we see in Breaking Bad. His story is part of why I wanted to watch the show in the first place, and yet, I honestly didn't find it all that interesting. This is the side of the series that's closer to Breaking Bad, showcasing crime deals and shootouts, and filling in additional details on the Salamanca family, and it should be really interesting. But I honestly found this side of the story kinda dull. I feel like Mike is already too hardened and experienced to make for a compelling character to follow as he navigates this criminal underworld. In Breaking Bad, it was compelling because Walter White was a complete novice to criminal activities, which not only made his early interactions with criminals more identifiable and interesting to follow, but also made his eventual transformation into the most notorious criminal of all way more enthralling. Mike is a great character, but he's not a good anchor to follow this story with. He's always so stoic, and I never get the sense that the character is changing or developing. There's some great episodes with Mike, like 5-0, where we see a flashback of him exacting revenge on 2 cops that caused his son's death. But that's a flashback, meaning we don't get to see how every aspect of that experience affected him over time. There's also this story arc towards the end of season 4 that I really enjoyed, where Mike supervises an extended sleepover with a bunch of Germans building the famous Gus Fring meth lab we see in Breaking Bad. He finds a kindred spirit with this Werner guy, who eventually leaves the sleepover early in order to see his wife, even though that's against the rules. If you leave Gus Fring's sleepover early, it is punishable by death. And so we get this really amazing scene where Mike finally has to deny his morality and shoot Werner under Fring's orders. It's one of the best scenes in either series, and it's a great way of showing the slippage of Mike's morals. But honestly, I feel like this is too little, too late. This is fundamentally one of the only times we see Mike grapple with morality, and it's at the end of season 4. I just don't think he was utilized that well in this series outside of a handful of episodes. Going into the show, I was also excited to learn more about Gus, and starting with season 3, he sure does appear. Does he do anything particularly memorable or malicious? No. Do we learn anything substantial about him that we didn't already know? Not really, no. Is it still cool to see him? Sure, I guess. I always love the way he's framed and shot. They make him look incredibly sinister through lighting and camera tricks. But like, he doesn't do anything. I don't care about his conflict with the Salamancas because ding dong, we know how it ends. I almost feel like this side of the show only exists to fill out articles on the Breaking Bad wiki. Like, I guess it's cool to see how Hector Salamanca had a stroke, or the process of how Gus's meth lab was made, but I feel like this stuff is only mildly interesting to me because I'm a Breaking Bad fan. I don't know how any of this really holds up as a standalone story. The worst part about all of it, however, is how barely connected it is to the other, more compelling half of the show. Jimmy and Mike meet each other pretty early on, and sometimes they do jobs together depending on if Mike needs a lawyer or Jimmy needs a jack-of-all-trades handyman. But these interactions only become less frequent as the series goes on, at least until season 5, which we'll get to. The other seasons of the show have such minimal interaction between the two characters and their storylines that it's kinda comical. I like the two of them together as well. They're great foils to each other and their interactions are always fun. But there just isn't enough of the two of them together to really justify Mike's storylines in my eyes. Also, this is kind of a nitpick, but how old exactly is Mike's granddaughter supposed to be? I swear she looks older in this show than she does in Breaking Bad, and this is supposed to be a prequel. I am so confused. Also, why is Lydia barely in this show? Like, I was actually really interested to see how she becomes the frazzled mess that she is in Breaking Bad, and why her relationship with Mike is just so poor in that show. But she barely shows up and barely interacts with Mike, so what gives? I don't know, there's always season 6, I guess. Let's move over to the Jimmy side of things, which I obviously feel much more positively about. Positively enough to say that it's a better and more compelling story than Breaking Bad? No, not really. The thing about Breaking Bad was that it was a visceral thrill ride with all sorts of crazy twists and turns, while also being a really compelling character study about a man who gradually loses his humanity as he descends further and further into the criminal underworld. Better Call Saul takes both of these elements, tones them down immensely, and splits them between the Mike and Jimmy storylines. I've already expressed why I don't think that works for Mike, but I do think the toning down does work for Jimmy. In my opinion, Saul Goodman was never nearly as much of a monster as Walter White, so it makes sense that his turn to the dark side is considerably less dramatic and far more realistic. That's what a lot of people seem to like about this show. It has stronger characters with better development. And I don't disagree. I think Jimmy, Kim, and even Chuck are fascinating characters with incredibly interesting trajectories over the course of the series. In particular, I love the reveal late in season 1 that it was Chuck who didn't want Jimmy to join Hamlin McGill all along. It was such a brutal scene, and it continues a trend in this series of the most brutal scenes being conversations, rather than big action moments. I find that to be a refreshing change of pace from Breaking Bad, and there was one towards the end of season 3 that really got to me. You know the one. There's a lot of conversation on whether or not Chuck is directly responsible for Jimmy becoming Saul Goodman. Was he right to treat him like Slippin' Jimmy from the get-go? Or should he have been a more encouraging brother and helped him become an honest lawyer? The fact that it's possible to see both points of view and understand both Jimmy and Chuck's perspective in their many battles is a sign of great writing. Jimmy and Chuck are both in the wrong on numerous occasions, and they both take things too far. And yet, you want to see their constant battle of wits unfold because that's what it is. A battle of wits between two really smart characters. Chuck is an incredibly compelling antagonist because aside from his goofy electricity allergy, he is a realistic character. A toxic family member who puts his brother down at every opportunity because he doesn't think he's capable of change. And this in turn pushes Jimmy to do worse and worse things in order to get back at Chuck for the terrible things he's done. It's brilliant. Both performances are brilliant, the writing is brilliant, everything about their conflict is just so damn good. In my opinion, the series so far peaked with Season 3, Episode 5, Chicanery, which is nothing but a court battle between the two brothers. Everything in this half of the series thus far built up to this explosive conclusion, and my god is it explosive. One of the best episodes of television I've ever seen, honestly. Also, it's the only episode so far that only focuses on the Jimmy stuff and doesn't have Mike's plot lines at all. What a funny coincidence that is. Oh, and by the way, don't get it confused. I hate Chuck. He's the worst, from his pompous, self-righteous attitude, to his insistence on this ridiculous electricity allergy, to all the emotional abuse he serves Jimmy. He is the most hateable character in either series, but it's pretty apparent that he's the villain, so it works because of that. He's a villain I love to hate, and who I was excited to see die. At first. While I think it was a good idea to remove Chuck from the show going forward, I feel like it makes Jimmy's character lose a lot of momentum since he didn't really have an antagonist to fight back against anymore. I kinda got the impression that they wrote themselves into a corner by making him lose his law license for an entire year. Cause I'll be honest, the stretch between the second half of Season 3 and most of Season 4, where all he's doing is selling cell phones to potential criminals, kinda lost my interest. I understand that it was important for what happens in Season 5, but that doesn't stop it from being uninteresting in the moment and a huge downgrade from the previous main plot line. I was a lot more invested in Kim's struggles during Season 4 and it helped keep my interest afloat until the final few episodes where things picked up again. I don't have a ton to say about Kim other than she's a really great character whose arc mirrors Jimmy in some pretty unexpected and chilling ways. I like her and Jimmy as a couple a lot and their interactions are always a highlight of the show. Anyway, the end of Season 4 started to grab me again, particularly through the introduction of Lalo, who made an impression right away by venting and killing a guy in electrical for no reason. I thought his phone call with Werner was also chilling, and I wanted to see what happened with him next. Turns out he didn't really do anything as intimidating or chilling or batshit crazy in Season 5, aside from a few scenes towards the end. But hey, at least his performance is good. What really got to me at the end of Season 4, though, was Jimmy manipulating the jury by insincerely talking about Chuck in order to get his law license back. It's basically the equivalent of this scene.
Chowder! Being polite worked!
I know! They totally fell for it!
This is the moment when Jimmy becomes Saul Goodman. Literally, since, you know, that's what he changed his lawyer name to afterwards. Yeah, Winter was a fantastic episode. Probably my second favorite of the series because of how many amazing scenes were crammed into it from both the Jimmy and Mike storylines. Plus, it got me into ABBA again, so that's a win as well. And Season 5 was mostly pretty solid as well, with some great Jimmy and Kim interactions, and the final few episodes that actually tie Jimmy and Mike's storylines together. Wow, finally. But again, this is where I feel that the overratedness of the series starts to rear its head again. I watched Bagman, the episode where Jimmy and Mike get stranded in the desert and have to make their way back. And I thought, yeah, that was a really good episode. Then I read the reviews for it and wait, people really think this is as good as Ozymandias? The literal best episode of television ever? Are you serious? There's like 10 different Breaking Bad episodes that are better than this one. It's got some cool action and good character moments between Jimmy and Mike, but like nothing superior to the action scenes of Breaking Bad, and definitely nothing superior to Walter and Jesse's interactions and journeys together. Now, the scene in the next episode where Kim stands up to Lalo, I'll give you that one. That was amazing. But for the most part, I feel like I'm living in an alternate universe when I hear people praise this show to the extent that they do. There's a lot of amazing stuff in this show, as I said previously, but not only do you have to get through the far less interesting Mike stuff to see it, you also have to deal with the honestly kind of glacial pacing of the Jimmy plotline at times. Bob Odenkirk himself has expressed some disappointment at the show's slow pace on numerous occasions, which I think is pretty telling. I remember seeing an article once that complained about how all Jimmy did in Season 2 was air a commercial without permission and tamper with a document. I didn't mind that these were the only slip-in Jimmy actions he took, but I do wish he could have interacted with Mike more and maybe gotten to some more dangerous situations earlier on. I feel like by the time Bagman aired, people were just craving this sort of visceral action that the show rarely delivered before, and gave the episode more credit than it actually deserved. The show didn't do itself any favors by putting Jimmy in a dangerous situation in the second episode by bringing Tuco back and forcing Jimmy to negotiate for the lives of these twin boys. That was a great scene, but it kind of implied that this sort of visceral danger would be a more regular thing for him in the series, when it really wasn't. Another thing I want to mention real quick is the flash forwards at the beginning of every season, where we see what Jimmy is up to in his new life after the events of Breaking Bad. These are often the highlights of the season since we're naturally curious about what happened to him after Breaking Bad, but I kind of feel like they don't really fit in this show. I mean, we're supposed to juxtapose his paranoid, miserable life in the present with his rise to being a sleazy lawyer in the past, implying that the stuff we see in Better Call Saul is what leads to Jimmy's miserable life in the present. But like, Jimmy isn't managing a Cinnabon in Omaha under a fake name because of anything that happens in Better Call Saul. It's because of the fallout of his interactions with Walter White. There's a pretty sizable chunk of the story between Better Call Saul and its flash forward sequences, so cutting from one to the other feels a little disjointed. You could argue that the stuff we see in the flash forwards was an inevitability of Jimmy's slip into criminal activities, and the reason these scenes are juxtaposed like this is because the events of Breaking Bad were just the straw that broke the camel's back, not necessarily the cause themselves. But I still find it a bit odd to show these scenes while we're following Jimmy's story. Ultimately though, I guess it would be pretty disappointing if this series never flashed forward to show Jimmy's life after Breaking Bad, and I would rather have these scenes than not have them, so I guess it's not too big of an issue, just something I felt was a bit strange. The last thing I want to bring up is that at the time of this video coming out, the 6th and final season of Better Call Saul has yet to release. I'll definitely watch it, and if they stick the landing, which they probably will, I'll probably feel a lot more positively about the show looking back on it all. Right now, it's a solid 7 out of 10 show, well worth checking out if you're a fan of Breaking Bad, which by the way is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. And I'm sorry to go against the grain here, but despite its moments of brilliance, I just don't think Better Call Saul is up to the same standard. I don't blame it for not reaching the same height as its predecessor. I wouldn't have expected it to if it weren't for everybody telling me that it was better than Breaking Bad. I'm glad it works as well as it does for so many of you, but it just doesn't for me, unfortunately. I'm intrigued to see what ends up happening to Kim at the end, but I already know that Gus will triumph over Lalo because he's in Breaking Bad and Lalo isn't, so I'm not really as invested in that aspect of the series. I always just feel like I'm watching two different shows at the same time, with one clearly being better than the other despite having its own pacing problems. And yet, it sometimes seems like I'm the only person who feels this way. Like I'm crazy for thinking this show is a bit overrated. I mean, I'm not crazy. You think this is a masterpiece of a show? This chicanery? Breaking Bad has done better. That episode where Walter and Jesse are stranded in the desert with the RV. Are you telling me that Bagman is a superior character building exercise to that? No, you're making that up. He spent a season and a half selling cell phones. And I kept watching, and I shouldn't have, but I kept tuning into the show even though I was bored. What was I thinking? The show will never change. It'll never change. Ever since the first season, always the same. Couldn't connect the Jimmy and Mike storylines to save its life. Oh, but not our Vince Gilligan, not our genius Vince, stealing the viewers blind. And this show gets 21 Emmys while Breaking Bad only got 16? What a sick joke. I should have stopped watching when I had the chance. And you have to stop watching. I apologize. I like this show, I swear. I just got carried away. Is there anything else to mention? Oh my god, I completely forgot Nacho existed. I think that's a good summation of how I feel about Nacho's character. Good night, tri-state area. Hello folks, it is I, Good Saul Man, here with some breaking news! You see these satellites behind me? Well, hackers are using them to steal your private data and all your photos! You belong on TV, because the internet is clearly not safe to browse with all these hackers swarming around. Unless, of course, you protect yourself online using Surfshark VPN! That's right, Surfshark VPN! What is Surfshark VPN? Well, I'm glad you asked, because Surfshark VPN is this. An incredible product that encrypts your data and protects you online. Surfshark VPN allows you to access geo-restricted content, meaning you can trick your browser into thinking you're in another country, thus allowing you to access content you couldn't get otherwise. That way, you don't have to physically travel to another country to watch that country's exclusive Netflix content, for example. You can also use Surfshark and its Surfshark Alert system to get alerts anytime your email address or password is compromised. Surfshark Alert scans various databases of leaked information and notifies its users if their data is found so they can take take action, which is an absolutely invaluable feature. Surfshark is also totally unlimited, meaning you can use it on as many devices as you like, even all at the same time. No other VPN allows this. Go to surfshark.deal/Rillis and enter promo code Rillis to get 83% off and 1 extra month of Surfshark VPN for free. It's an amazing deal, and it's even better because it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not satisfied, you can cancel during those 30 days and get your money back. Once again, head to surfshark.deal/Rillis and enter the promo code Rillis. Have a great time with Surfshark VPN.